Okay. EB, Success After Lockdown with my partner, Anthony Cologne.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In the building. In the building.
Success After Lockdown. We here today with young lady, lovely lady, Miss Porsha Louder. So
Yes, yes. Welcome on the show. Welcome
we
on the
welcome
show.
you to Success After Lockdown.
Thank you
Yes.
for inviting me, for real. Yeah,
We're
So
making a positive impact everywhere in the world today. It's a beautiful thing.
that's right.
That's right.
absolutely.
So go ahead, Eric.
So no, I was just gonna say so speak Anthony, because I gotta turn this TV down. Sorry.
Okay. So again, welcome on the show, Miss Portia. Again, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. That I see that you're formerly incarcerated writer, speaker, photographer, advocate, talking about prison compassion, grits, and recovery.
Yeah.
That is amazing and awesome, right? So we love to showcase, you know, people making changes and positive changes, right? To change that, break that stigma of how people view formerly incarcerated people or people in recovery or suffering through mental health. I don't think that the world is engaging enough in these conversations um, and breaking the stigma. And so, thank you for being on the show because it just shows that change is possible,
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
and that's the beautiful thing. When we look at the news and we look at everything that's going on, there's a sad reality that we still live in a world today that people complain about the horrors of what's going on in the world, right? But yet we keep showcasing and putting more attention on the negativity as opposed to the positive that people are doing,
Yes,
right? And,
absolutely.
and people that's giving back to their communities and doing something to better themselves and to be a better person in life today.
And
Um,
so, and so if I could, and so if I could, uh, uh, I just want to express to you. I was talking to you a little while ago about me and my partner growing up in the Bronx, and we, grew up since we was about 10 years old. We known each other. We took that opposite path in life where crime and the street stopped me at the age of 20, and I wound up serving 27 years and 6 months. And my partner did a total of 22 years altogether, in and out. And that also was our curse and a blessing because it led us back to this path on a positive path together. So we reunited with each other in 2020 when I came home, and I expressed to my partner, my ideas and my vision that I had. And so I grew up in prison without a GED, and I came home with my GED, my associate's, bachelor's, and my master's degree. And
woo,
and then, I didn't
yes.
let the time do me. I did the time productively. I told myself that it was time for change, and I created and made that change. With them taking that self introspection of myself, and in there is where I kind of had the vision to create a platform for men and women that's formerly incarcerated. And I said, when I go home, I want to be able to highlight these men and women that's home, that's staying home and giving back positively to the community and society as a whole. Because I began to do the research before I came home, at least 10 years before I came home, and I began to see those men and women that was making a difference in New York State. I wasn't necessarily privy to knowing a lot of other states what they were doing, except under watching the news and current affairs. But in New York State, I knew of and knew a lot of men that were home and being successful in their own right.
And
And
women.
that's right. And woman I knew of. So I didn't know any woman personally that was formerly incarcerated until I came home. I began to establish a whole alumni that was in women's prison that I began to meet, coming home. And that leads us to LinkedIn. So my producer, Mark the cameraman, he
Big shout out.
big shout out to Mark. You know, he behind the scenes right now doing what he do, and he introduced us to LinkedIn as far as a social network of people that's formerly incarcerated that's making a difference on LinkedIn, and that's where we were introduced to Miss Porsha Louder, the Porsha Louder, and
What an introduction.
absolutely, and I enjoy just seeing women as yourself and others that's making a difference wherever you at, wherever we at. So we in New York, my partner's in Florida, and you are where?
In Utah.
Did you say Utah?
I live in Utah. Yeah.
Nice. And you know what? I always say this, right? This the first, like, because I've been meeting a lot of people off of LinkedIn
Yeah.
such as yourself and others that's in different parts of the states. This is the first time I met someone that's in Utah, and it was nice to meet you.
Well, I'll try to represent well for you guys.
Absolutely.
So tell us about yourself, Miss Porsha. Tell us a little about your background, where you came from, why your story is a little unique, and why you chose to do what you do to give back.
Cool. Be happy to. So I grew up in Utah on the outskirts of a small town. My parents, my mom was like a super hippie, so she didn't believe in any rules. My dad was a Vietnam vet who had PTSD, who was mad all the time. Amazing people, though. I love them. And my parents had 7 kids, so I'm the oldest. And without any rules, I just became the gang leader at a pretty young age. So I'm kind of running things, you know. And by the time I was 13, I was getting into trouble. My first struggle in life was boys. Like, I thought what boys thought of me was the most important thing. So relationships, and it had to be older boys. And then started drinking and partying. And by the time I was 17, I was pregnant with my first child. I remember just not knowing who I was. Like, I have a lot of compassion for myself as just a young girl. I thought, I just need to find the right man. Everything will be okay if I just find the right man, you know? And there's always men out there that you can find. So I found one that was 10 years older than me. He was 28. I was 18. And he made me this grand offer. You should marry me because I can take care of you. And I was like, okay, you know? So it was true love. That marriage didn't last. It was less than a year. I had never been to the city. So you guys are in New York. I had been in the country. And my dad got transferred for work to the city in Utah, which is Salt Lake City. So I came up to Salt Lake for the first time to visit my parents. I brought my son with me. And I was kind of blown away, like, by the grandeur of the city. Like, I could get a job, I could have a life, you know? And when I went back to the little town and told my ex-husband, I want to move to the city. And he's like, well, go ahead. We don't even get along. Let's just get divorced and you go. And so we were so committed, you can tell. I moved to Salt Lake, started working as a photographer, found out I was pregnant again, and called my ex-husband, and he said, yeah, I don't really want to be a part of that. So by the time I was 21, I had 2 children and was a single mom and no child support. But I had a job. I remember feeling very alone through that period of time, living with my parents. After I had my daughter, so I had 2 children, I remember thinking, this time I'm going to do it right. This time I'm going to find the right man. Never about me, you know, coming to know who I am and my own worth. And so I started dating again. And the thing about me is I struggle with over fertility. Like, I get pregnant like that. And I know people are like, didn't you figure this out? But I got pregnant again. So I was 23 years old, pregnant with my 3rd child. And I remember being scared. And I think that was my first time realizing how serious my situation was. Like, I need to do better for my children. And so I said a prayer. I wasn't a super religious person or really religious at all, but I just was scared. And I felt this strength that I needed to place my son for adoption. So I kind of was guided to do that. And started looking for the family, met a wonderful family. They were really supportive. And right after my son was born, they were in the room. They picked him up and carried him out. And I remember just feeling empty inside. Like I had no idea how to process any of that. And the doctor wrote a prescription for narcotic pain pills. And then I went from drinking and the things I did to just totally addicted to prescription drugs and eventually street drugs. And so my life came to a head early on when I was in my 20s, a few years later, after, you know, my drug addiction was really serious. My parents were taking care of my children, and I came home late in the middle of the night one night. And when I walked in the house, I had my son, my oldest son, who was 8 years old, was standing by the window, and he was crying. And my mom said, I don't know what it would take for you to change your life, but this little boy loves you more than anything, and all he wants is you. And if this little boy isn't enough for you, Porsha, I don't know what ever would be. And so that night, I took my son and I went downstairs and I just laid on the floor and I begged God for help. I just said, I don't know what to do. I can't stop. I can't change. And my little boy was like, Mom, you're so beautiful. Don't be sad. And so I made a commitment that night that I would go to any length to change. And I actually the next morning woke up and went across the street and asked a guy that I hardly knew, but I knew that he might be able to help me because he knew some things about recovery. And he was happy to help me, and he started me on this path of recovery and healing from my drug addiction. And so, you know, I just remember feeling extremely overwhelmed at that point in my life by just the simplest steps, because I had been in such a dark place. And I learned how to live some basic principles that became my foundation for changing my life. And I got a job, a really simple job, you know, and then as my ability to mother my children and change my life grew, I started my own business as a photographer, and I actually met a really good man. So the key is just don't look for a man, because, you know, when you start working on yourself, a good one usually shows up because you're doing the right things. But I had it all backwards. And so, I met the man that I'm married to now. We've been married for 27 years.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Yeah,
congratulations. Love.
Yeah.
That's a milestone.
Chad adopted my children. And my business really grew. One of my struggles is two things. One, I love to hustle. It's a problem for me. Like, I don't just like to do drugs. I like to hustle. You know, it's about myself. The other one,
we understand.
Yeah, I know you do. It took me a while to learn some things about myself. But at that point in time, I was just like, well, first it was photography. And then, of course, I have more kids because that's what I do. I just keep having babies. And so my husband and I had been married for about 5 years. I had 2 more kids. I hired a nanny to take care of the kids. I was doing about 200 weddings a year as a company. And I relapsed. Yeah, it was a lot. I had, you know, employees. I was building a studio. And then I had a back surgery and I relapsed on drugs. And man, when I did that, my hustle vibe just came into play, and real estate was the thing in Utah. And I thought, I'm going to do this. I told my husband, stay home, take care of the kids. I'm going to go kill it, you know? And I got involved in these illegal real estate deals that were just during, you know, 2005 to 2008, the market was booming. And, you know, I remember when the feds showed up to investigate, because I had just been able to power through the hard things in my life. But yeah, you're up against a brick wall when you're up against feds, like all my own weaknesses. You know, I think I told the FBI they needed to go take a lie detector test. They love me. They hated me so much. Oh, you know,
with that PSI report, right?
if I could have, looking back, I'm like, if I could have just said, all right, I made a mistake. How can I make it right? Right. Just like an ounce of humility, it would have been a completely different game for me. But by the time I walked into a federal courtroom, I had pissed off everybody, and my range was 0 to 7 years. I had no criminal history. I should have, because I've been doing things most of my life and getting away with them. But the judge just looked at me and said, if I could give you more time, I would. I'm going to give you the 7, you know. if I could give you more, I would.
Right.
And man, I remember that day looking back, because I had all my kids in the courtroom and my husband, and thinking, what have I done? Like, it was like this shock to me that I had been in such denial about what I was doing. And it became really clear that I had traded everything important, which is time, for the most, unimportant, which was money. And I had tricked myself and been living just in the worst way. And so I was super fortunate. The judge gave me 8 weeks to say goodbye to my husband and kids. In the feds, there's no federal prison in Utah. So I was sent to Dublin, California. And I spent my first year, I guess, in denial, pretty much thinking that the feds did me dirty and it was all them. And, I was writing on a blog. So I was like, they're doing that. I would write stuff and send it out and they'd post it. And I'm just like at war with myself. I remember the captain calling me over to his office, and he said, Louder, do you like being in my office? I said, I don't mind. You guys have a nice bathroom over here, whatever, He's like, he goes, what did he say? He goes, we didn't do this to you. He goes, we're just housing you. I don't understand why you have so much anger towards us. And I said, well, you can open the door and let me out if you don't like it. He's like, I'm going to open the door to the shoe and let you in is what I'm going to do, I got to spend a few months in the shoe. But yeah. And then I spent just about 5 years in prison. My second year in prison, they transferred me to Minnesota. And I spent 3 years in Minnesota. And that's really where I got honest with myself and I realized I had done this to myself, and started to take ownership and imagine a new future for myself. And I would say by the end of my sentence, I was shipped back to California for the last 7 months. Man, I was freer than I've ever been in prison. Like, I felt totally free and my heart was open. And then I met these amazing people like you two who have come from much more difficult circumstances than me and have these amazing souls. And I found my favorite people in prison. And, when they called my name and I left, all the girls came running out and cheering for me and were so kind to me. And I came home and my heart was so full that I knew I would have to write a book. So I wrote a book just to share that. Yeah.
Can we highlight that real quick, Mark? What's the name of your book? I think it's Getting Louder or something like that.
It's Living Louder. Yeah, I need to send you guys a copy.
Absolutely.
On Amazon. But the cool part about it is that I got it in 500,000 prisons on tablets. So that's
My producer put you up there right now.
Yeah, love it.
So yeah, I wrote a book, and then people started asking me to speak and work in prisons, helped write a curriculum for prisons. What else have I done? I just finished my next book. It'll be out in the next few months. So I'm excited about that. Nice. And yeah, what's cool though, the best part is rebuilding. Like, as I rebuilt my integrity, I've been able to make an impact in my family and community's lives. Like, I've been able to connect in a real way, and my kids trust me, which is kind of amazing. That might be the best thing. So
that first of all, amazing. I'm sorry, EB, but this is like my topic here, and I love the underdog story because she hit on all my topics here: recovery, drugs, acceptance, and integrity. Right. And that's an amazing journey, right? Sometimes we get so stuck in believing our own lie that we stay stuck there. We become oblivious to life, right? And everybody else's fault except our own. Right. And tell people when you accept accountability. And good thing to the feds that they do stick to the guideline. Though he would like to have gave you more time, he can't. It's not like a state judge. State judge, if he wants to, have a hearing and they decide to say, your guideline is 15 years, but I'm just going to give you 25 because I don't like your look. Put in the field. Federal judges have to go by that guideline, right, and they stick to it. They can go, to the max or go lower, but they can't go above that on that guideline. So good to that. I want to tap on recovery, right? Being addicted to drugs, being out there, because I'm in recovery myself. I just celebrated. I'm coming up on 11 years in May. And I always tell people, if it wasn't for recovery, I don't know where I'll be at today, because drugs was my escape. It was my way to numb everything. It was my way to not deal with the reality of life. It was my excuse not to be responsible and accountable. It was definitely my escape for not accepting anything. Right? And it wasn't until I got it wasn't until, you know, I decided to put down the drugs and the alcohol that life got a little better for me. And then tapping into my true being and my purpose in life and doing what I do now. So shout out to recovery for that. You know, that experience though, having to go through what you went through, when that reality set in, when you had to go see the judge and he smacked that gravel down, like what was going through your mind, having all these kids, right? Having these kids, having a relationship, one that you found that finally works for you, that accepted you for being you, and wanted to share life with you, and have to be like, I messed up, now I got to go away, right? And kudos to him for sticking by. I joke with my wife all the time. And I tell her, you know, she asks, would you come see me? And I'll be like, listen, there's two places I really would not want to go see you. And that's jail and hospitals, to be honest with you. So please try not to get sick and don't do nothing stupid where you're going to end up in either one of those places. But, you know, what was going through your mind? What was that experience going from the street? What was that like, going that first night, spending the night, and you just stuck by yourself, staring up in the ceiling, knowing this is now your reality?
And before you even answer that, this is what I think we call the mental health part of things right now. And we have a segment for this, and let's get right into it. So with that thought,
okay, on the beat.
And so this is our StreamYard segment for cell therapy, where we talk about the mental health issues and that hard line with formerly incarcerated. So just you know, get into it.
What was that for you?
You know, I think when I first got to prison, I was so devastated and shocked. Standing in the courtroom was one of the loneliest experiences of my life, and traumatic. I just remember thinking, dang, when they say the United States of America versus Porsha Louder, my whole country's against me. Like, you know, I feel like I'm standing there with nothing, and I've got this weapon on the other side. It's just a really lonely place. I felt like as low as a person could be. And I remember the judge was going to take me into custody that day. And my husband stood up and he was crying, and he just, it took him a minute to compose himself. And he said, please give her time to say goodbye to her children. She needs that. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, here's a man that I've drugged through all that, and he's like my advocate right now. And the judge did give me the 8 weeks. And the 8 weeks changed everything, because I watched my children sleep. I cried and cried and laid there, and I just realized that I had given everything important away, you know, for nothing. And it was just, all that really mattered was those connections, those moments. I remember driving my son to school and saying, this is just so beautiful. How did I miss it? How did I miss driving you to school and think that what I was doing was important? This was the important thing, you know? My husband drove me to Dublin, California. It was just the two of us. That's a 14-hour drive from Utah. And, you know, it's Oakland, so it's a rowdier crowd than Utah. Utah's pretty chill. And I remember when I got there, they put you in A&Os, and I went to an FCI, which for women is all security. You have a camp or an FCI. They sent me to an FCI. And
it's like a low.
No, it's all, like, there's lifers there. Low is camp. So there's like camp and everything else. And for a variety of reasons, they sent me to the FCI, which actually worked in my favor. I don't really care for the camp. I did camp time at the end, but I liked the bigger complex, and I liked the structure, and people know how to act right a little bit better. at a bigger facility than because they're not going to get away with all the crap they do at the camp, you know.
I know. I was in USP Atlanta. I was in FCI Miami. Yeah.
Yeah, and the last bit of time I did, I worked at a USP because I was on a complex, and so I was like, whoa, these guys got no color, no nothing, and they're doing life here, you know. So, but anyway, for me, you know, it was definitely mental. Mental was part of the finding power back in my life because I felt so victimized, which was all I had done this to myself, but I blamed everybody else. So that was the journey of accountability. But there was also a spiritual component, and I don't care what religion or anything else you are. 3 days in, I thought, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm looking around. You know, I left a husband who loves me, children who love me, a community who supported me. I was on the news, but I have a really strong community that was just really supportive. And so walking into prison with 1,000 women all wearing khaki and nobody looked very happy to be there. Like nobody said, hey, welcome. We're so glad you're here, you know? And I remember my bunkie saying, you got to get out of here. You got to get out of the cell. I was there for like 3 days. I wouldn't even leave. And she said, they're going to throw you in a suicide cell. Like, you know, you got to get it together. And I said, go away. And I remember getting on my knees and saying probably the most important prayer I've ever said, which was just, God, I feel like nobody to anybody. I have failed everybody. I have failed myself, my children, my husband, and my community. And I can't see a life for myself anymore. I am in the deepest hole. I don't know how to get out. I just need to know who I am to you. And I remember feeling the most incredible amount of love and connection. Like I felt this deep connection to everything. And I could see that even sitting in a cell on my knees, that I had an incredible amount of value, that we all did, that we all had an important purpose. And that experience gave me the kind of strength to know who I was. Never in my life had I known who I was. I always thought the right man, the right job, if I make enough money, but I could see that I'm much deeper than that. Like my worth and value, it has nothing to do with those things. And after that, I went to education and I had them give me a job and I wrote a curriculum and I started teaching and, you know, and it was a journey, but knowing who you are, getting connected to your real purpose and who you really are, your identity that's much deeper than your accomplishments is very powerful. And you can do really hard things when you know who you are.
Finding your purpose in life. You hit it right on the nose. And that's what it's about. Finding your purpose and trying to fulfill it to the best of your ability. And that's the difference when you find your purpose, whether it's making money, doing it, or giving back, it's more fulfilling than a paycheck. That's what I tell people. Because it helps you feel the purpose inside the void that you had inside your heart and your mind. So that is amazing, right? What do you do on a day-to-day basis now to like keep going? Why do you stay motivated? Why do you keep pushing forward through all this? Right now, you're successful. You got everything back. You have your kids, you have your husband, you have successful business, you're writing a book, you're in the community. Why did Porsha say, you know what? I want to do something else different. I want to make a bigger impact in life. I want to give back and give a voice to those who have not found a voice.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think meeting the people that I did in prison and having, you know, you guys got more time than I did, but 4.5 years or 5 years almost without a phone. Prior to that, I was going. And all of a sudden I had to slow down and really deeply connect and get to know people that were different than me. I just have so much love for the women that I met. And actually I'm just honored, like, to be a formerly incarcerated person. I would never ask to be pardoned or anything else because for me, I like to stand with people that I have so much respect for. You know, there were people that had nothing that were so kind to me. I mean, and I could see how privileged my life had really been. My parents weren't on drugs. My parents were married. They raised us. You know, I was this wild child in my community, but in comparison to the people that I met in prison, my life had been really easy. And so all of a sudden I felt this mission to connect people that are like the people in my community. I talk open about prison. I share prison stories. I manage a Facebook group that's 500,000 members, and I write about my experiences, and I humanize the women that I met with and the men that I meet with now. I work with both men and women, and I go into men's prisons. And because that's where my heart is. Like, that's where I found myself, was in prison. And I learned so much from the people that I met. I couldn't just leave and leave it behind. It was such a transforming experience for me. And, you know, I feel like I just saw the whole world. Like, the former me kind of died. I mean, and a new me emerged, and it was just not the same person. And so yeah.
So I have a question, right? And you speaking about that, right? It being a transforming situation for you, incarcerated. I know in the men prison where I was at, you know, it was really challenging because it was just like being in the streets again. And you know, you was a step away from just being in those streets again. Like you go to the yard where I was at, and there's everything in the yard, all type of drugs in the yard, all type of violence, you know, knives and everything else. A whole lot of trouble to get into. You know, I've seen a lot of things. I've never been in a women's prison, so I want to ask you, did you see, you know, anything that was like shocking to you, or was there anything that got in your way of
severe violence?
Well, when I first got to prison, it shocked me because I hadn't been in the streets like that, you know? So I was surprised. The biggest shock to me was how codependent everyone is in prison. Like, the women are really, they cannot be alone. And I think men struggle more with the whole gang violence, and women are a lot more codependent. And so it's a different environment. Although everybody's always trying to, not everyone, but a lot of the women are trying to hustle and get drugs or cigarettes or whatever else. It wasn't as, I know that it's very accessible in men's prisons. I have friends, especially in state prison, probably in the feds too. It wasn't the same for women. It wasn't near as accessible. But I was definitely not interested in using drugs or doing any of that. Like, I wanted to change my life. The pain that I had experienced, being separated from my husband and children, like, it was a shock to my system. So I wasn't looking for that. And what I found was, in time, it's what you focus on. You know, my first year, I just thought, this place is a mess. Everybody's a mess. You're doing that. You're doing that. Well, I got tired of focusing on that, you know, and I started looking for all the good and how to connect in ways that were healthy. I wrote programs where we could have support groups and come in and talk about our pain, because I wanted to heal. And I also knew that I had something, you know, I had something a lot of women don't have. I had a husband supporting me. I had parents supporting me. I never needed for commissary. My sister always sent the maximum amount. Like, there were no issues in comparison to most. I was very fortunate. And so I could give back, you know, I could see that. But yeah, different environment. I think women's prisons are a different environment.
Level of violence and where you were at.
A little bit. People got in fights. You know, I saw that mostly over girlfriends. That's the problem, is women, they all fight over girlfriends, and men, you know, they have a different way of doing it. But either way, I feel perfectly comfortable in a men's prison where all that stuff is going on, and I feel perfectly comfortable. But I know who I am. I know where I stand, and I have pretty firm boundaries. And I learned that in prison. It's like, go ahead and act a fool. I remember these girls getting in all kinds of trouble, and the lieutenant called me over and he goes, "What did you see?" And I went back and I said, "You guys never pull that garbage across from my room again, because I don't need to be getting called in there. You know, I'm not going to go tell on you, but you just don't do that garbage anymore." So I was pretty good at setting my boundaries.
Absolutely. So as far as, real quick, but you're being released from prison, could you explain, like, for that, how was that feeling? Because you did, I always say 1 year, 5 years, 20, 30 years, that's a long time. period. 12 months is a long time to being away from, where you come from and put in. It's a culture shock. So what was that like for you, that first day home?
Oh my gosh. They let my husband pick me up and he drove me to a halfway house in Utah. And I remember sitting in that halfway house going, I feel weird. I did not feel right. Like, I don't want to be here. Send me back to prison. I did not. I remember a guy walked by and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, man, I don't feel right." He's like, "You'll be all right. It'll get better." And I said, "No, for real. Like, I feel really uncomfortable." And he's like, "You know what was so surprising to me about prison?" And I said, "What was that?" And he goes, "Mayonnaise makes everything taste better." And I was disconnected, I was like, oh, and that's when I realized I need to stay connected to where I've been, because there's a lot of people out here that haven't had that experience, that didn't understand. And since I don't live in a community where people have been to prison, I started reconnecting. I worked in drug treatment. I started finding friends and people that have been through this so that I could keep that part of me, because I just felt weird. I really embraced the people I met and I didn't want to lose that. So
let me ask you, how long have you been home now?
I've been home as long as I was in prison. It'll be 4.5 years.
4.5.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with your kids? What was that like, having that conversation, coming home and having to explain from the oldest to the youngest why mommy was gone for 4.5, almost 5 years? What was that conversation like?
Well, I did a lot of work when I was in prison. Halfway through, my husband would come out about once a year because I left him pretty broke. And they were in Minnesota, and I looked at my kids and I said, "You have to know I did this." Because my son was starting to get pissed off at the world,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "You need to tell me how I hurt you, Jackson. This wasn't the feds. This wasn't your principal. This wasn't your dad. It was me. Tell me how I hurt you." And my kids responded differently. One of my daughters said, "I don't even want to talk to you, Mom. I'm so tired of this, And it took me I wrote her every week, and she never even opened a letter for 2 years while I was gone. When I came home, I knew, you can't expect the immediate everybody's okay, right? I had hurt them, not just being in prison, but years leading up, using drugs, not being present. So the first step is accountability and honesty.
That's right.
And then from there, it was like me showing up when I say I'll show up, keeping my word. One of the coolest things that happened is the son that I placed for adoption reached out, and he's like, "I really want to get to know you." So we've been building a relationship. And with each of my children, I just work in their lives in any way that I can to earn their trust and to build real, genuine connections. And it's been a process. It'll always be a process, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful process. So
yeah, I asked that question because I know a lot of people struggle with that. And for me personally, I know I have my oldest daughter who's 29 years old. Our relationship is kind of really strained, and she kind of make it her point that whenever she wants something and I don't give it to her because I don't want to, feel that that's the only way I can connect with her, she has no problem reminding me how much of a POS I was, and a drug addict and all this stuff. And I had to learn the boundaries, right? To separate the different and take accountability for all my actions and everything that I've done to be absent from her life and move forward. But I can connect with kids. I got a great relationship with my youngest daughter. I got a great relationship with my son now, but with her, I just can't. It's like I can't connect with her because she blatantly told me, "Listen, you want my love, you want my respect, then you're gonna financially take care of me." And I'm like, "You're 29 years old."
Yeah.
When you want a father, when you want a conversation, when you want to, someone that can probably support you and guide you, that have been there, done that, and have changed his life, but I can't continue to allow you to continue to punish me and hold and make me feel bad because you want to be selfish.
Right. It's true.
Right? And it's
a process too. It's a process that they go through, no question. And we go through it too.
right?
You know,
And I tried everything, and like sometimes even today, with over 10 years clean, with being successful in what I do, it's like I can connect with a stranger on the street who's been through it all and get them to respect me and look and be like, wow, and listen to what I'm saying. But with her, I just can't connect with. Even to this day, I still can't connect without compromising my boundaries and my belief.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's one of the hardest things to struggle and accept and a pill to
that's right.
swallow. Right.
Well,
And
we
that's
on
why
a journey.
go ahead, Evie.
No, I was saying we on a journey, man, and that's
Yeah.
understandable. That and all of us are. You know, they they don't know a lot of times. You know, and it takes a while. Everybody learns the hard way. Some in some instances, and some of us it take longer than others to learn things. I think time will definitely, and sometimes
Yep.
time, it goes in a different direction that we don't want it to
Right.
go. But I think that just putting God first,
Yep.
putting just your like you said, with your beliefs and what you believe in first, and that you genuine, and you love your daughter, you will always love her. I think that alone will reach her somewhere along the line, in life.
So, one, I just sent you a Facebook friend request. Also, so when you mentioned that, I sent you a request.
Right on.
Too, it's like we love to hear these stories, right? And I love how you embrace everything that you've been through, right? Because a lot of people, especially when we talk about coming up from a small town, you want to be everybody knows everybody's business, but to accept you and to come out and to be like, okay, I take accountability. Yes, I did this, I did that. I am a formerly incarcerated individual, but I'm also a mother today. I'm also a wife today. I'm also a businesswoman today. I'm also a published author. I'm also a motivational speaker. And your list can go on and on and on. And like, this is what I tell people all the time. Stop allowing your past to dictate your future. Stop allowing people to set limitations on what you can achieve just because you made a mistake in your past. And I think that's one of the hardest things, for people to accept. And this is why our recidivism rate keeps going through the roof, right? People make excuses on why they can't succeed. Oh, the government. Oh, I can't get this job because of my background. Oh, this woman, don't give me the freedom. Oh, my kid did. And like all these excuses. Let's find, we know what the problem is. Let's find the solution. But when are you going to take control of your life?
Yeah.
I love when I listen to people talk about, oh, how the government screwed me, how this and that. And yeah, you may have some here. But I tell them, listen, every time you stick your middle finger up and say F the government, the only person that gets screwed is you.
Absolutely. Amen to that.
Right?
I learned that hard way.
And I say this, I tell people, like, we hear about how overpopulated and crowded the prison system is, right? But I say, you know what? In all my life, in 49 years on earth, I've never had a judge, no matter how we talk about how overcrowded the prison system is, right? I've never been to court and the judge looked at me and said, well, Mr. Cologne, because of your crime, you have to go and do some time, but we're a little overcrowded right now, so come back and see us in like 2-3 years. We're hoping to have an opening for you. I go, no, they always make a bed for you. There's always a bed for you. There's always some place to put you, right? So like, when do we wake up? When do we take that accountability and say, you know what, like, something's got to change?
Yeah.
I realize I'm a bad drug user. I'm a horrible criminal, right? So why not try something different? Why not try to take that same energy that I've worked so hard to do negative and to turn it into a positive?
Amen.
Right? Like, this is what me and my brother Eric does, right? And
absolutely. If you go ahead, go ahead.
And like the sad part is, like, we grew up, with a lot of friends who are still out there on the street, who still not have made no change in their life, and not no judgment or nothing like that. But it's like, if we can do it and we was considered the worst of the worst, why
Amen.
can't you?
Why can't you?
Some
And
people
and
go ahead.
and I think this is a good segue, because we're running up on time now. Just if you could share with us, what would you share with those that you left behind, on transitioning and coming home and being successful? Because when we say success after lockdown, we don't say that as we millionaires, we got all this money. Success is measured for me. And when we got into this, we wanted to see people's success in their own right.
Right.
Just coming home, staying home is success for me.
Absolutely.
And then now there's different levels. Some come home, stay home, and give back to the community. Some come home, stay home, and just keep that 9 to 5 and stay within family boundaries. That's also giving back to the
Absolutely.
community by staying out. So what would you say to those that you left behind?
Yeah. I would say that the journey has been internal for me. And that is something that any of us can do wherever we are. When you take that step to restore your integrity, when you get honest with yourself and the people around you, you become that person that is worthy, ready, and prepared for the job. You do the work internally and the steps will follow when you get out. You become that person with enough humility and gratitude that somebody recognizes that and you wants to give you that chance. You keep your word with yourself. How you do anything is how you do everything. Get up in prison, make your bed, keep your word with your cellie, keep your word with yourself and your kids, and you can start wherever you are. And what I have found is that people say, man, your husband waited. And I'll say, yeah, he's a really great guy. And I was worth it. I did the work.
Wow.
And anybody can do that wherever they are. You can do the work on yourself. And if you do the work, the world will show up for you when you get out. And it's not easy. You're going to, and if there's anything else I could say, it would be like, be willing to take the setbacks because there's always something beautiful on the other side, man. Like you're going to have those dips. It's not just going to be smooth sailing because anything worth having, you work hard for and it will show up for you. Just don't you give up. The best is yet to come,
She hit it right on the nail. That
was very well said.
Sometimes some people have to get uncomfortable to get to that comfortable spot in life.
Absolutely.
And that's what a lot of people break at.
And we definitely would love to have you back too, Porsha.
Okay.
We actually stream y'all. We actually do live podcasts too.
Yeah.
I don't know when we coming to Utah, but we coming to Utah.
Hey, I got a place for you to stay. You let me know. I'd love to do it. It's beautiful here.
Okay, and we already started in Florida. So we started our podcast in Florida. We'll be in Atlanta, North Carolina. So we definitely, Missouri and so forth. We definitely plan to hit Utah since we know someone now in Utah. We have a friend in Utah.
Yeah, and the goal is just to get the word out there, right? To empower formerly incarcerated men and women who are making a change and difference in day-to-day life, who are living life in within the lines of the law, and just finding their truth.
And ultimately bringing down that recidivism rate.
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
our voices are, what shows alone that we're making this difference and we're not going back. So we're not continuously committing crimes and keeping this recidivism rate that all of our states hold so dearly with having this misperception of formerly incarcerated men and women. Well, if you could plug your website, how can people reach you? How can our followers reach you and everything? Your book. We appreciate it.
Okay, I'm just gonna chat. Mine is PorshaLouder.com, so it's pretty easy. My website. So Living Louder, PorshaLouder.com. And I connect a lot with people that are either in the system or because I have My book is in audio form and PDF form in prisons on tablets. And I even have an email where they can reach out to me and ask questions. So if you're in prison, I don't know if you guys stream in prison yet, but if not, we need to make that happen because
we definitely need to make that happen.
Yeah.
And we can use some guidance on that if you have, how we can do that, because I think it could be definitely
some people, because I've been able to get some things in prisons. Yeah, it's cool. So
I mean, appreciate it, because all our content is positive. That's positive. Period.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, Porsha, tell me what's next for you. I know you just said that you're working on a new book that you just finished. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Okay. And I've had nonprofits reach out to me, and I work in for-profit with mental health. I do groups. I write books. I talk. There we go. So you never know that our paths cross and things change. So I'm looking
absolutely. We definitely have to stay in touch.
Man, that's awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah. Mental health. I own residential mental health homes out here in Florida, 14 of them, and that is my passion. It's my company right here, Premier Wellness of South Florida. So definitely would like to connect more with you, talk more with you, to see what we can do to make a greater impact in our communities and in the world. And it's been amazing and a pleasure to speaking with you, Porsha. You are a shining light to all those. Like you just bring brightness and light. And we're very honored and privileged to have this time with you. And like really, really, really would love to get you on again and see what we can do to connect and reach more of a bigger demographic with our stories to make a more change and positive impact on this world.
And you are now one of my celebrities. So yes, you are. And we definitely we're gonna send you our number,
awesome.
And please let's stay in touch, because I think this thing could be bigger than, it's bigger than us. And this is our mission. This platform is created for something bigger than just podcast. And that's where we moving. And we'll talk about that later too.
Sounds great. So wonderful to meet with you guys this morning. I hope you have a fabulous afternoon, and we will be in touch.
Absolutely. And happy New Year's. Make it an amazing new year. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your light, your insight, and continue to do what you do.